Hello, hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome, welcome. This is the channel where I paint my face, turn the camera on, and talk about books that I love. February is the season of love and I love it. I am an absolute hopeless romantic, so every time February comes around, the countdown to Valentine's Day begins and I start reading a ton of romances. I thought, why not share the love and talk about some of the romances that I would recommend people read in the lead up to Valentine's Day to really get you into that lovey-dovey mood. As February 14th is Valentine's Day, I have made a list of 14 books, which mixes between dedicated like romance books and then also fantasy books with a very, very heavy romantic plotline throughout. Let's just kick things right off with Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. Heartstopper is a graphic novel series which follows these two lovely boys on the front cover. We've got Charlie on the left here, who is an openly gay student at his high school. Anyway, prior to the events of this book, he was outed at his high school and was bullied quite heavily as a result of that. But at the start of this book, the bullying's kind of stopped mostly. So he's in a more healthy place in terms of the environment that he's in. But unfortunately, the residual impact of all of that bullying, so for example, anxiety, constantly second-guessing himself, being quite shy, that all still sort of plagues him to this day and through the events of this book. And then we have the lovely Nick, who is a classic, like, masculine rugby lad, but he's classified as this sort of typical guy's guy sort of person. What happens is Nick and Charlie meet, they strike up a bit of a friendship, they spend a lot of time together, and it follows the two of them as over time they start to question their own sexual identity, face homophobia in their school and environment, and face coming out to friends and family, and just overall surviving high school and getting to know each other and building on this relationship. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful, sweet series that really takes you back to the days where you remember how horrible high school was, but gives you hope, I think. The second book is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is a book that I borrowed from the library, so I do not have it on me. The first timeline is where Evelyn Hugo has reached out to a journalist by the name of Monique, I think, and she asks Monique to come and interview her, and eventually they discuss Monique writing Evelyn's life story. The second timeline goes back to the 60s, 70s, and 80s where Evelyn was at her prime, and it talks about everything that she did to get that status. So the way that she used her body as a tool, the people that she married to get out of certain situations and manipulated into marrying so that she could solve certain problems that she faced over time, and then also the forbidden love that she was never able to admit to because in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, unfortunately being gay or lesbian was not exactly something you would discuss. I believe it was illegal for a certain period of time. So as you go through the story, Evelyn shares her life story with Monique, and Monique begins to question whether or not she's really that different from Evelyn, because a lot of the situations in her life are reflecting things that happened to Evelyn, and whether or not she can actually judge her for actions that she took, and finally why she actually reached out to Monique in the first place, why it's so important that Monique is the one to tell her story, which I think was the most fascinating twist at the end of that book, so I would recommend it. It's got a beautiful, beautiful love story. It's a very, very heavy book, I will say, but the love story is absolutely beautiful. Next up, we have Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is one that I have talked about in length in a number of videos, I think, so I'll keep it quick with this one. Follows a woman by the name of Chloe Brown who is chronically ill, and upon getting into an almost car accident, she sort of has a flashback about her life and realizes there's nothing to note, nothing exciting. She writes herself a list of things that she wants to, sort of like a bucket list, a list of things that she wants to accomplish before the year's out, and these things include go camping, do something bad, have meaningless sex, enjoy a drunken night out, ride a motorbike, all the sorts of things that she feels like she needs to do so that she can get a life. But this isn't a sort of area that's very familiar to her, so she recruits Redford Morgan, who's the sort of resident bad boy in her mind, to help her knock a number of things off this list. She's also incredibly attracted to him and kind of spies on him in a sort of, what's that Hitchcock movie? It's like, is it Rear Window or something, where they spy on him, they spy on the people through the window? It's a very, very sweet romance. It's obviously quite sexy because it's Talia Hibbert, and the thing I love about Talia Hibbert's writing as well is that the characters could just step off the page and you wouldn't question it. Next up, we have The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This is one that I didn't actually rate quite highly when I read it because the general storyline I didn't love. but I will admit to actually really enjoying the book as I was reading it. There was just a couple of things in it that didn't really mesh well with me. It follows a third-year PhD candidate by the name of Olive, who her best friend, I believe, wants to date Olive's ex and is really, really nervous about it and really hesitant to do it. So in a way for Olive to say to her friend, like, it's fine, just do it, she goes and of course kisses the first person that she sees to prove to her friend that she's over this guy. This guy just so happens to be Professor Adam Carlson, who is kind of the university, not bad boy, but grump, and he's got quite a reputation for being quite overbearing and critical. Olive kisses him and they start on this sort of fake dating trope so that Olive can convince her friend that it's fine to go out with the other guy, and so that Adam can convince the university that he's not going to leave because the university's worried about, the university's cutting off his funding because they're worried that he's gonna leave. Next up is another one that I've talked about quite a bit, which is the Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren, another one that I borrowed from the library, so I don't actually have it on me. The Soulmate Equation follows Jess Davis, a statistics wizard and single mother who is kind of not really looking for romance, but then her friend kind of convinces her to sign up for a new dating service called Genetically, where you take a swab of your DNA, submit it to Genetically, and they find your perfect match based on the DNA that you submitted. And of course, she gets a 98% match with the founder of the service, Dr. River. And this 98% match thing is really super rare. It is a golden opportunity for an absolute public relations storm, and Jess is thrown into a world of interviews, social functions, just as she's trying to really get to know this man that is apparently her soulmate. Next up, we have Beach Read by Emily Henry, which is another very sweet romance, which follows a romance writer by the name of January, who's kind of in a bit of a writing slump. And so she goes to this house that she didn't know her father had, and she decides she's going to stay there and sort of work her way out of this writing slump. There she meets Gus, or Augustus, who just so happened to be her rival from college, and he also happens to be in a writing slump. So they make a deal that they're each going to write in each other's style to sort of see if they can get out of their slump. Gus is going to write a romance novel and January is going to write the next great American story. To help them along with this quest, they've decided to go on a certain number of adventures together. January will take Gus on a number of romantic dates to get him into the sort of romance vibes, and then Gus will take January to the remains of a site where a cult used to be, so he can interview some of the people who used to live there, so that she can sort of write, or so that she can sort of draw inspiration from this for her novel. A good old juicy romance ensues as they spend more time together, and it is just a really lovely read. Also by Emily Henry, then we have You and Me on Vacation, which follows two characters, Alex and Poppy, who met at university and decided that every year they were going to go on a vacation together over the summer. They did this for a period of about 12 years, except 2 summers ago, something went wrong and they stopped going on these vacations. Poppy decides she wants to sort of rekindle this friendship and just figure out where it went wrong. And so she propositions Alex to go on one last summer holiday with her. So you follow them as they're trying to repair this relationship on this current holiday, but you also go back in time to the holidays of summers past and figure out how they met and how their first holiday went, how holidays where they tried to bring their significant others went, and then finally what happened 2 summers ago to make their friendship fall apart. Next up, we have the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa K. Adams, which frankly gives me the idea that every man in a relationship should read a romantic novel to understand how to treat their woman right. The Bromance Book Club series follows a number of men who are sort of at the peak in their various different fields, various different careers. Gavin finds out a very humiliating secret, which is that his wife has been faking orgasms for a long time in their relationship. This tears down his self-confidence, this just tears down their relationship because she's been lying to him, and also he hasn't been satisfying her, and he kind of feels horrible about that, and he wonders how he couldn't have known, and he wonders why she wouldn't tell him. Upon finding this out, Gavin absolutely loses it, and Thea asks for a divorce. This is the last straw in their relationship. And this just sends Gavin into an absolute spiral because he doesn't want a divorce, he still loves this woman. So Gavin turns to his friends who created the Bromance book club, where a bunch of these men read romantic novels and let it give some insight into what women want. With the help of a Regency historical romance book called Courting the Countess, Gavin slowly starts to figure out how to win his wife back, how to ignite that spark in their relationship again, and how to regain her trust. Next up is the book that I kind of spoiled at the beginning of this video, which is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the beautiful Fairy Loot edition, which I absolutely love. As I mentioned before, this is a fantasy, but it has an incredibly strong, incredibly heavy romantic plotline throughout, so I would consider it a romantic read for February. Our main character Poppy was chosen from birth to be something called the Maiden, which is essentially a woman that is not allowed to be looked at directly, touched, spoken to, nothing. She's completely hidden away from society. She's like this pious, virginal figurehead in society until one day when she will eventually ascend so that the rest of society, the rest of their world can kind of continue. As this entire kingdom kind of rests on her shoulders, she definitely feels the pressure, and she also feels the rebellion of wanting to be desired, wanting to be loved, wanting to make connections with people, and also wanting to protect herself, which is when she meets Hawk, who is a guard who is honor bound to protect her, to keep people away from her, and also to bring out her greatest desires as much as she tries to fight him. As he incites her anger and tempts her with the forbidden, she kind of puts her world at risk and is fighting against her duty versus her desire, and it's just a really, really beautiful, sexy love story in that sense, as well as having some very interesting sort of more fantastical elements as well. Next up, I've included The Duke and I by Julia Quinn, which is the first book in the incredibly well-known Bridgerton series, all because of the Netflix show that came out at Christmas time last year. And just as a side note, I'm so excited for the second season, which is coming out in March, I think. The Duke and I follows Daphne Bridgerton. The Bridgertons are sort of a well-known family in the ton for two reasons. One, they are incredibly attractive, incredibly beautiful, and two, they are named in alphabetical order. So you've got Anthony, Benedict, Colin, Daphne, Eloise, Francesca, Gregory, and Hyacinth. Daphne has never had a problem with making friends with the eligible men of society, but she's known for her kindness and wit and not for her ability to draw out desire for her, and so she's really struggling to find a match. Then we have Simon Bassett entering the fold, who is a duke who's very much wanting to shun everything about society in order to open up Daphne's prospects and also get people to leave Simon alone. The two start a bit of a fake dating trope where they pretend to be absolutely enamored with each other so that people will just kind of believe the stories that they want to push. Next up, we have another book which I have talked about quite a few times, which is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. This is the first book in her series. The Kiss Quotient follows Stella Lane, who has Asperger's, so she's always kind of struggled with dating, and she's been quite happy with her career. She's quite successful until one day her mother turns to her and says, right, it's time to get married. You need to settle down. Stella is obviously incredibly nervous about this. She's not good at dating, so she hires a male escort to tell her how to be a good girlfriend, how to satisfy a man, all that sort of thing. And this male escort is Michael, who is really struggling with mounting bills in his family. He's just trying to support his family, so he has this escort service that he participates in where he has a rule that he will never see a person more than once, until Stella comes along and kind of tempts him to change that rule. Next up, we have my second Christina Lauren book called The Unhoneymooners. In this book, we follow Olive, whose twin sister Amy is probably the luckiest person in the world. She constantly wins competitions, and she's basically found a way to fund her entire wedding without really having to pay for much at all, just through a bunch of won competitions. Olive attends this wedding, and by a complete fluke, and I think dietary requirements, everybody at this wedding gets food poisoning except for Olive, who is Amy's maid of honor, and Ethan, who is the husband's best man. So that Amy's honeymoon doesn't go to waste, she asks Olive to go on the honeymoon for her, and then she also invites Ethan, who doesn't really like Olive and who Olive definitely doesn't like either. But of course, they're on a package honeymoon, so Neither of them really wants to get kicked out. They're in a beautiful location, so they have to pretend to be newlyweds. And then just to make matters worse, they run into Olive's boss and they have to pretend to be newlyweds in front of him as well, and the lie continues. Next up, we have Almost Perfect by Julie Ortelon, and it's part of a trilogy, the Perfect Trilogy, which follows three best friends as they each try to find romance and put aside their own prejudices, their own traumas, their own experiences to, yeah, find romance and live happily ever after. At the beginning of the series, the three women, Maddie, Christina, and Amy, make a pact. Each one of them has 1 year to face their fears or face eternal ribbing from the other two. Maddie's challenge to face her fear is to have her artwork accepted at a gallery in Santa Fe. So to set herself up for success, she gets a job as a camp counselor in the area, which just so happens to have one slight hiccup in the plan, which is that the camp is run by her high school sweetheart and ex, Joe. Maddie absolutely broke Joe's heart, so naturally he's not exactly keen to see her again, but the tension is sky high between the two of them, so as old desires burn, Joe makes it clear that there is only one way that Maddie will find her way back into his heart, and that is to take her art seriously and to put herself first. And we are on to our last book for the video, which is The Coldest Touch by Isabel Sterling. This is a vampire romance set in a high school. It follows Elise, who is cursed to see the death of every person that she touches, making her a death oracle, which means that she's very much closed herself off from everybody that she knows and loves because she doesn't want to be constantly seeing and feeling the pain of their death. Elise then meets Claire, who is a vampire, and obviously because she's already dead, she is one of the few people that Elise gets relief from, in that she doesn't, she can touch her without seeing how she will die because she's already dead. But Claire has an ulterior motive, which is to recruit Elise into the Veil, which is a sort of secret organization that kind of governs the paranormal creatures, including vampires, werewolves, fairies. At first, Elise is very reluctant to work with Claire to sort of hone her abilities and remove this obstacle of not being able to touch anyone. But then she sees the death of a high school teacher. It's a murder, and it's the most violent death she's ever seen, so she's desperate to do something to prevent it. So she gets Claire to help her because she finds out that she might be able to prevent the death by being the Death Oracle. As Elise and Claire grow closer, Elise begins to wonder about Claire's loyalties while also trying to fight off the growing attraction that she feels for her. The melodrama is real, the mutual pining is intense, and there's a lot of the Vampire Diaries references, I think, throughout the book, which are interesting. But yeah, I would recommend this to anyone, again, who, like From Blood and Ash, are fans of fantasy but also love a good romance threaded throughout. So those are the 14 books that I recommend people read in the lead up to Valentine's Day, and of course on the day, to get you in the mood for the romantic season. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, if you've loved any of those books, if there are any others that you think should be included on this list, good romances that are perfect for Valentine's Day. Other than that, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be notified when I release new content if you wanna, no pressure. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!